Well, hello and welcome to continued supplemental learning for End Times Biblical Prophecy. This is the supplemental learning for our lesson Mark of the Beast, specifically talking about the Abomination of Desolation. So there are no notes to keep up with here. This is just for your own personal growth and information, so you can take your own notes if you would like. And so without further ado, we'll kind of get into what I've got prepared for you today. And so in our study, we talked about at the midpoint of the tribulation, there's going to be what's known as the Abomination of Desolation. And that is when the Antichrist will enter into the sanctuary. He will declare himself to be God. He will demand worship to himself. And that will come about by the false prophet and his image. And so now we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the fulfillment of the Abomination of Desolation. So for this study, I want you to turn to Daniel chapter 9. But as we get started, I want to kind of set it up a little bit more here. Chronologically, the Antichrist will start off as a nobody. Nobody's going to necessarily really know who he is. He's going to kind of come out of the back of the field and make his way to the front through diplomacy, through manipulation, through cunning tactics. He will establish himself as the global leader. So he'll be a good politician, essentially. He will assume the leadership of the coalition of those 10 nations. If you will recall, the 10 nations are going to sign a peace treaty with Israel and protecting her in the battle of Gog and Magog, the war of Gog and Magog, against the Northern Alliance, probably made up of Russia and possibly some of the East as well. But through this war of Gog and Magog, the Antichrist will start to assume control over these 10-nation conglomerate of peace treaty, but also he will be looked to globally as the one world leader, and he'll gain more authority, more control, leading up to that 3.5-year mark, the midpoint of the tribulation. Now, the Abomination of Desolation has been partially fulfilled once already. We are told in our study here that the Antichrist will help to rebuild the third temple, and that will likely happen very early in the 7-year tribulation period. Even today, everything that they need to build the temple is currently available. All the materials, all the furniture, all they need is a green light to build. And so likely the Antichrist will, either through diplomacy or through force, he will either remove the Dome of the Rock, to which the Islamic nations hold as their religious center of worship, or he will arrange for them both to be built and worshiped side by side through diplomacy. And so the third temple has not yet been built, but they are desperately waiting for that to happen. It must be built before the Abomination of Desolation can occur. And so we know that that must happen in the timeline somewhere. But looking back now, let's look at this prophecy because it was partially fulfilled already once before the birth of Christ, but it will be fulfilled in its entirety during this tribulation period. We are first told about this in the book of Daniel, but specifically Daniel 9:27, it says, "And he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate." Now, the concept of a dual fulfillment of a prophecy is not a new thing. That's not something we're reading into Scripture or we're applying to make it work for our benefit. In fact, in the writing of the Hebrew prophets, this was actually very common, for there to be an immediate fulfillment and then a future fulfillment, with the future fulfillment being all-encompassing. So the first fulfillment is in partiality, but the future fulfillment is in its entirety. Specifically, because Christmas is right around the corner, we can think of the prophecy that Isaiah mentioned about the birth of the Messiah. In Isaiah 7:14, he is told that a child will be born of a virgin, and that this would be prophetically completed at the birth of the Messiah. But then immediately during the life of Isaiah, as a sign to the king that Isaiah is ministering to, Isaiah the prophet has a son who has a very long name, and that son is born within the next year. And that's the sign to the king that God is on his side, that he can continue. And so it's fulfilled partially in that a son was born there in the time of Isaiah, but the son wasn't born of a virgin. And the son didn't have the government upon his shoulders and wasn't called the mighty God and the Prince of Peace and the everlasting Father, right? So it was partially fulfilled there, and then it will be fulfilled in its entirety at the birth of Jesus Christ. And so there are many other examples of this partial fulfillment and then a greater fulfillment. Sometimes this is known as dual fulfillment, but it's more important to understand that it is partially fulfilled and then it is completely fulfilled in a future time. So it's not fulfilled completely twice, but it is fulfilled one time partially and the second time in its entirety. So let's read Daniel chapter 9 about this time of the abomination of desolation. So you're in Daniel chapter 9. We're going to start in verse 24. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city to finish the transgression and to make an end of sins and to make reconciliation for iniquity and to bring in everlasting righteousness and to seal up the vision and the prophecy and to anoint the most holy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to rebuild Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 70 weeks, and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall even in troublous times. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the Prince shall come and destroy the city of the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood. And unto the end of the war of desolations are determined. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. For the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. So Daniel is given a prophecy. He's told, we've studied this, of course, in an earlier lesson, that there would be a period of time from the order to rebuild Jerusalem all the way until the coming of the Messiah, that the Messiah during his ministry, he would be cut off, he would be killed. And then there's left that last week, which is the 7-year tribulation. And so during that 7-year tribulation, we're told that the enemy will sign a covenant. This Antichrist will sign a covenant for 1 week or 7 years. And during the middle of it, in the midst, it says, verse 27, and in the midst of the week shall he cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, and the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate. So basically, what we're told is the Antichrist will help build the temple. We see that in Revelation. All the worship will restore to the temple, so the Jews will bring appropriate sacrifices again. They'll be bringing sacrifices to the priest for the first 3.5 years, and everything will be going well. And then at the midpoint, that is when the Antichrist will walk into the temple. He will declare himself as God. He will likely pollute the altar, meaning he will offer a profane sacrifice. whether that be a pig's blood or even a human, he may offer, as we see the tie to blood sacrifice and death in Satanism. Also, you see, things like abortion and child sacrifice in all the Old Testament. And so it could be a human that is offered on the altar. That is when the Jews that are going to recognize that he is in fact not of God, and they will flee. And so from this point on, from the midpoint to the end, that is the kingdom of the beast and the outpouring of persecution against the believers. So as we continue now looking, we see that in this passage of the prophecy, there's going to be polluted sacrifice. And that's going to be very important. The land of Israel, of course, it was conquered by Babylon. So Judah, specifically where the temple was. And so Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar came in, conquered them, took them back to Babylon. And then, of course, we see the restoration, the order for them to go back and to rebuild the temple and then to rebuild the walls with Nehemiah. And so worship was reestablished there in Judah at the temple. And this was the building. This is the second temple that they built. Of course, Solomon's temple, the first one, it was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. And so they built the second temple. The tribes of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi were the ones that were brought to Babylon. They came back. And then, of course, the Medo-Persians are the ones who defeated Babylon. So when the Jews come back to the land, it's Medo-Persia that is ruling. But then eventually the Medo-Persian Empire, they are conquered by Alexander the Great and the Greeks. And so the Greek Empire now controls what used to be Babylon as well as Judah. So where the temple is, where the Jews are, the Greeks now control it. And this is about 300 BC. The Greek Empire lasted from 332 to 63 BC, and they were defeated by the Romans. So this is important because the Greek Empire had a ruler over the province of Judah, and his name was Antiochus IV. Now, if you were to read the Maccabees, you would find the story of Hanukkah. Hanukkah is an event that occurred up in the about 165 BC, roughly. Well, basically, Antiochus IV ruled from 175 to 164 BC. So that was the time in which he ruled. During that time frame, that is when the story of Hanukkah is written and then started to be practiced. So that's why you don't read about Hanukkah in the Old Testament, because the Old Testament was no longer being written when Hanukkah occurred. But you will read about it in the book of the Maccabees. The Maccabees, there's nothing wrong with the Maccabees, just recognize that it's not scripture, but it is historically accurate, and you can get good historical information from the book of the Maccabees. So Antiochus tried to influence the Jews in which he ruled over to blend in the Greek Hellenistic identity. And so he was trying to get away from the Jewish identity and get the Jews to kind of be blended into the Greek Hellenistic identity and to their culture. Antiochus began to systematically remove all aspects of Jewish worship. This included buying all the priests, bribing them. He had them all in his pocket to bring in pagan idols into the temple. Greek idols were being built all in the land. But the tipping point is when Antiochus IV entered into the temple and offered a pig as an offering. Of course, this is acceptable in paganism, but it was not acceptable in Jewish worship because the pig is not kosher. It's an unclean animal. And so when he did that, he brought the pig in to worship his gods, but he did it in the second temple. And so obviously this was very offensive to the Jews. And so this fueled what's known as the Maccabean Revolution. And this happens from 167 to 160 BC. This revolt, that's where the story of Hanukkah comes from. So they don't have a way of bringing in oil to keep the menorah lit during this rebellion. And God supernaturally preserves the oil so that it can remain over, I believe it's a 7 or a 10-day period. And so that is what's celebrated during Hanukkah, is how God preserved the oil so that the menorah did not run out. But also how God preserved the nation as they were fighting against this injustice and against the Greeks. Many believe that this act of desecrating the temple and sacrificing a pig is, and declaring himself as their God, basically, is the abomination, or the fulfillment of the abomination of desolation. But it cannot be a complete fulfillment of Daniel's prophecy because it does not take place in the middle of the tribulation, during the middle of that 7-week period. Daniel's prophecy says it happens in the midst of that covenant. In addition to this, Jesus says that it has not yet occurred. So the abomination has not occurred because Jesus said it's future still. And so this event of Antiochus desecrating the temple, that occurs 190 years before the birth of Jesus. So Jesus was aware of it. All right, he was immersed in Jewish culture. He was a Jew. And so he says that this is not the complete fulfillment, but there is a future fulfillment in which the abomination of desolation will be completely fulfilled. And that is future still, and we'll see the Antichrist fulfill that in its entirety. The Antichrist will enter into the third temple. Of course, the second temple was destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD. He will likely aid the building of this, the Antichrist will. So the Jews will likely view the Antichrist as a hero. The Antichrist will declare himself to be God, and he will demand worship. He will offer a profane sacrifice in the temple, probably something unkosher, unclean, but even maybe a human sacrifice. He will then begin to persecute the Israelites. They will flee to the mountains of Petra. Their God will protect them. 2/3 of them will die during this persecution. 1/3 of them will cry out to Jesus Christ as their Messiah. And he will continue to then persecute the rest of the world as Israel will be out of his reach. And so that is kind of a 30,000-foot overview of the abomination of desolation. You could certainly go deeper into that. But really, for our purposes, what we need to understand is that this prophecy written by Daniel, it was partially fulfilled at the time of Antiochus IV. It was kind of a shadow of things that are to come, but it was not completely fulfilled at that time. It was a partial fulfillment, which is not unusual for prophecies in Hebrew literature. And so in its entirety, it will be completed in the tribulation at the midpoint, and that is when it will be completed in its fulfillment, with the Antichrist being the one offering the profane worship. So I hope that this was a blessing to you. I hope that you got something from it. I hope that it encourages you to dig into the Word and to continue to study to know the Lord better. And if you do have any questions, I encourage you to send those to me at pastorjerry.fbcclute@gmail.com. And I'd be glad to try to give you as best of understanding as I have at my disposal so that we might pursue Christ together. Take care. I love you, church, and I will see you soon. God bless.